Now, both Connor and Amber grew up in the care system. Duncan Dunlop is a former chief exec of Who Cares Scotland. That's a voluntary organisation that represents children and young people in care.
Most children who enter the care system don't stay in one place. They don't go from, a family that's struggling and there may be, abuse and neglect in that space and good reason for them to come into care. But what you don't necessarily think is that they don't necessarily end up in the forever family straight away afterwards. And even if the people are prepared to look after them and want to do that, they don't necessarily get the mental health support or other ways to really accept and process what's happened to them. As they estimate, there's 250,000 people living in Scotland who are care experienced. So there's a heck of a lot of people out there who are care experienced, and that's what matters, because you might not be in care for your entire childhood, or you come in or out of care, so it depends what order is. So the system may say in the day they take an audit, there's 10,000 children in care, but those who have been in need of that level of support, there'll be living in this country 250,000 people. That includes adults, children, and young people. But it's a hidden community, and until relatively recently, it's been quite a hidden identity group. And the consequences of care, well, the one thing that's in common with everyone who's care experiences, they've been exposed to and quite often affected by trauma, but often actually entering a care system itself was another traumatic process that happens to a child that they don't understand why they're entering it. They're split up still, even though there's legislation in place from brothers and sisters, and they're taken away from all that they know. And there's often good parts in everybody's life. So even the good bits can sometimes go, whether that's a school and a teacher, or whether that's a pet or a granny.
Can you help me then? How do children end up in the care system or care experienced?
So you end up being care experienced because it's been deemed that there's a high risk of abuse and neglect, or you may be affected by the death of parents too, in terms of there's nobody actually to look after you, or the people who are meant to look after you are not able to look after you. So it may well be that you've got a mother who's affected, who actually loves her children, but is totally affected by addiction, is an abusive relationship, there's coercion going on there, and she can't get out of it or change her circumstances, and the children are seen as too risky in that environment, so they may well be removed. It may well be that, there's only a single parent, and the single parent gets terminally ill, and then the children have to enter care. There's many different routes into care.
We know, don't we, that people who come from a care experience background, they're more likely to end up in prison and to have issues with addiction.
Yeah. I mean, about 25% of adult offenders will be care experienced. I mean, there's some pretty bleak statistics out there, which may well turn your listeners to think it's fate that they're going to end up in these terrible places. They're not. I mean, I could give you any number of statistics from whether it's mental health, doing worse in education, leaving school with not having the relevant qualifications, or not going on to what you call a positive destination, which is a job, college, university. So you're 20% less likely to enter one of those. There's a huge number of things, any social, what you look at, indicator of not doing well in society and life. Yeah, you'll find care experienced people overrepresented, but it doesn't need to be that way. Physiologically, they're the exact same as other children. If we help them understand the trauma, we help them belong so they know they matter, and fundamentally we hold them in a stable, loving relationship, we're able to overcome this. But that just doesn't happen. Our care system is not designed that way to enable that to occur. So too many of these children therefore struggle. If you look at it, so you look at the drugs deaths come out annually, and it's another bleak statistic we look at in Scotland. But why don't we know how many of those are care experienced people? We don't. And if we did, we might get compelled to actually see it as a public health issue and actually do something to actually tackle the lack of a reform within care itself, because we've talked about it for long enough.
The Scottish Care Review, set up by Nicola Sturgeon, published The Promise, and it pledged to overhaul the care system. What do you think about where we are with that?
I think it's been a flat-out failure. It is, it hasn't succeeded in doing that at all. There was great impetus and energy and momentum that should have been delivered that. It took far too long to report. But what the review came out with was no action plan, as in we will do this specific action by this date. And the real failing of it is there's no budget. So until you tell somebody how much it's going to cost to change something, it's not an action plan. So we had intentions, fairly reasonable intentions, that took 3 years to create, and were told that it was this great process driven and delivered by care experienced people. But in a sense, that's what's protected it from any level of scrutiny. It's been 7 years just about to the day since Sturgeon stood up on the SNP conference saying this was her priority. So if that's the case, why has more not happened? We have to look at care in the same way that Nye Bevan set up the NHS. A deep thinking by someone who's an expert in this space, realizing something wasn't working post-Second World War, struck the moment and tone and said, here's the solution. The care review also had a cast of hundreds, if not, of people who deliver the current system. The current system's the status quo. It will just maintain itself. So I think we have to look at the veneer really of what was created there and how it created it. But there's no different vision for how we will deliver this. And the consequence is related to Amber, it is related to Connor now being incarcerated for 22 years, and numerous other ones that happen. We don't even track the death rate of our care experience population. These are the children of the state. These are our children, because we took them away from their families saying it's not good enough. You know, and it's appalling until we know that. You look at what tracking drugs deaths has done. Finally, there's been a 20% reduction in that because it really focused in impetus in this. And in Scotland, we don't know. And these are technically our children. We knew how many COVID deaths we had within a day. But we don't know this. Oh, well, you're 25, 30. You're right not to be known as care experienced. And I don't want to be bleak in that, but until we get to some of that stuff, we won't really engage the public with this issue in a way that they properly understand it, like you see around climate change, you see around Black Lives Matter, and you see numerous other issues, for them to realize they are the solution. The solution to care actually lies in communities. It's people saying, I see that kid's in need, that family's really struggling, I'm going to get involved. Our narrative is you refer it on to a social worker who's overstretched and stressed, and there's probably a duty one doesn't know the family. That's not the solution. You live in the community alongside them. Get in there, let's get involved. But we don't have permission for that. It's too much risk. And I know I've worked with many thousands of care experienced people over the years, and they always want it's the person, it's not the professional that really makes a difference to them. Oh, they went above and beyond for me. They must actually care about me. Doesn't matter whether it was a teacher or a bus driver, there's so many examples of it. So the solution arrives in Scotland, but until Scotland understands it, I'm a bit cynical now about our real ability to make any political change, because we've not touched the care system. It's not reforming in the slightest as far as I can see.
Well, that was Duncan Dunlop, former chief exec of Who Cares Scotland, and talking about these are our children, our people. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, the Scottish Government's committed to keeping the promise by ensuring that all care experienced children and young people grow up safe, loved and respected. Almost £80 million is being invested this year as part of work to keep the promise by 2030. Ministers are also working closely with the Promise Scotland Who Cares, Scotland and COSLA, to ensure we can deliver on these aims. So we'll come back to that, I'm sure, in the days ahead, but quite extraordinary interview.